I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the City of Franklin Technology Commission meeting for Wednesday, March 26, 2025 at 6 p.m. Jim, would you like to do a roll call?
Yep. Alderman Pecorelli.
Here.
Dale Webler.
Here.
Laura Galusha.
Here.
James Rayberger.
Here.
Andrew Pelkey.
Here.
Max McWilliams.
Here.
And myself.
Okay. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is the citizen comment period. We have no citizens, so we'll move on to the next item. Review and approval of the February 26, 2025 meeting minutes.
I move that they be approved.
Anybody second that?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. All right, the next order of business is Microsoft 365 feasibility study and results.
This should be in your meeting packet. I also distributed it online via the Box.com server. Based upon the input that we had last meeting about the failed project, for the two people that weren't here with Office 365, there were some very questionable items where they were able to get Active Directory synchronization and the tenant built, but we were just at a complete and total dead stop trying to get two-factor authentication working. Our choice, two-factor authentication, was the YubiKey. The Yubico YubiKey. It is a FIDO2 key, and you can set it up with a password and authentication or completely and totally password-less authentication. Based upon the conversations that we had during the last session, there were several items that we wanted to turn around and address. The main goals of the study are actually on page 2 of it. One is we had an unroutable domain, a disjointed namespace where our internal domain name is ci.franklin.wi.us and our external domain name is franklinwi.gov. We were told by consultants that with the iBailey that you're going to have a lot of problems with that domain being an unroutable domain namespace. And it is true that, yes, we have to turn around and do something with it in order to turn around and relaunch and move that project forward. The YubiKeys require the Kerberos authentication. So when you plug it into your side of your computer and then you put in your password and then hit your YubiKey for your Windows logon in the morning of it, does use Kerberos authentication. And there was a question, do we need to be on the E3 public side of the equation with hosting, or do we need to be on the government G3 side of it? Or can you even do it with the G3 side? And last but not least, is the YubiKey really the right 2FA solution for our given environment for it? So the first thing we needed to kind of figure out is what exactly went wrong? Why did it not work? And based upon that analysis, that would then tell us, are we dealing with some form of an architecture problem that has to be remediated before we can turn around and actually move forward. So Max was very gracious and put me in touch with a Microsoft senior architect, which I normally would not have access to that particular resource. So thank you very much for it, and got to the chase real quick on what we were actually trying to do. I also had Converge TP, also formerly known as PDS, that we've done a lot of work with. And they put me in touch with one of their senior security consultants and onboarders and then gave me free access to a team. And with their help, we went through very structurally and very methodically what was going on with MDM, what was going on with enrollment. They did a proof of what our portal was actually set up as. They looked at the setup. They looked at all the conditional access policies for it. They looked at how we imported the accounts. Was the accounts working? Was Active Directory synchronization working correctly? Do we have any errors with any of that synchronization process? And get some form of an understanding of why 2FA was working in the Microsoft Cloud, but it really absolutely was failing internally on it. Based upon that feasibility study, it all comes right down to it. We have to do domain conversion in some way, shape, or form. We cannot use cifranklin.wi.us. It is not supported by Microsoft. They will only support an unroutable domain name if you are doing this in a lab environment or some form of a test environment. They absolutely, positively suggest you do not go into production with this. You are going to run into all sorts of problems if you turn around and go and start using a non-routable domain, because that is the environment to which they have programmed everything for. And they could easily bring out a new product or a new feature in Office 365, and it flat out isn't going to work. And there are people that insist on doing it, and they will put in all sorts of little shims, programming shims, to turn around and get the technology to work. The transform file that we were using on the connector server to turn around and do the synchronization with is one of them. But they said you will forever be chasing your tail if you turn around and go with an unroutable domain name for it. You have got to do something with it. So they gave us 3 options. And option number 1, and these are on page I don't think I put page numbers on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right behind the chart. So there's 3 options. 1, use Active Directory Federated Services. We aren't using Active Directory Federated Services because we're only one domain, and that's normally used by enterprise environments that have multiple domains and multiple hosts on it. His recommendation, they haven't done any programming on that for the past 5 years. And soon it will be deprecated. They haven't announced a deprecation date of it where it soon will not be supported, but it doesn't make any sense to turn around and build on your synchronization environment and authentication environment for something that may be going away in the upcoming near future. The second method is to add, as we discussed last time, a secondary UPN to the domain name, and then you then set every single account to have the secondary UPN as the primary UPN. You don't have to do anything but change what you got in your existing Active Directory environment, add that second UPN, and then change every single one of the user's accounts. You are or may have problems with Active Directory integrated authentication applications, depending if they use the Windows Identity Access model for programming for authentication, or if they turn around and use forms-based authentication. If they use forms-based authentication, then you're going to have to go into the database tables and start making modifications to it, depending if it's actually turning around and storing the credentials and storing the SID actually inside the application. So the vendor has to tell you if that's going to be the case or not. And the last one is to turn around and do a full domain migration. So when you build out a whole brand new Active Directory domain, that becomes what they call your account domain. Your existing domain is your reference domain, and you basically create all new accounts in the new account domain, and then you start migrating all your accounts, your groups, your group policies, your profiles, and then eventually all of your computer accounts into the new domain. So you take them out of the old domain, have them join a work group, add them to the new domain, and now the application should be in the new domain. And then you have to resecure it in the new domain as well for it. Why did it not work, and why was it working for two-factor authentication? Basically for one computer, which we cannot understand why my one computer got enrolled, but why was it working when you tried to sign an Entra ID in the cloud and wasn't working with Entra ID locally? And the quite simply is MDM was not registered on the computers. In order to have this work, you have to have Microsoft Intune mobile device management installed on your computer, and with it, it changes basically the login service, which used to be Windows Gina in the old NT days. Now it's changed so that your front login screen, when you hit Control-Alt-Delete, is Windows Hello. That replaced Gina. Now, if you turn around and want to do two-factor authentication, you get even a newer one, Windows Hello for Business, which you have to have Microsoft Intune. Correct me if I'm saying any of this wrong. He works for Microsoft, in case you don't know. So if I turn around and don't have MDM installed on my machine, I don't get Windows Hello for Business. And if I don't have Windows Hello for Business, no matter if I stand on my head, it'll never accept my YubiKey, because Windows Hello itself will not accept it. Why was an MDM installing on it? Because you basically set a group policy. It has to give it some URLs on where are the MDM servers, and then it's supposed to go out there and go register and then pull down all the components and register itself with your computer with both Microsoft Intune and Entra. Well, in order to do MDM, you have to have a license. And the license isn't bound to the user. The license is bound to the computer user. So the person who's logged in and is doing that enrollment for the very first time has to be, one, in Entra, and then two, also has to have a valid Microsoft MDM license tied to that user account. When it was trying to send the enrollment in using my account, it was coming in as ci.franklin.wi.us, because that was the account I was signed in. And it makes that enrollment request. Microsoft Intune takes a look at it with Entra and says, I don't recognize that account. I don't have any account in our domain right now that's registered to that. Enrollment request failed. It doesn't have a license, and there it sat. So in order to get MDM to work, my ID that I would have to turn around and be used to installing it with would have to be jmatelsky@franklinwi.gov. Then it would turn around and actually do the enrollment for me. And then I would actually be fine. So it's a situation of just one service, Microsoft Intune, that actually requires a non-routable domain, a fully routable domain, in order to turn around and function. And that was the reason why everything was failed. G3 tenant is actually the recommended tenant for us. I got this not only from Converge IT, I got it from Adrian Leperson over at Microsoft, their security architect. So we try to get the local municipalities on that. And it was confirmed with Cisco when I was having conversations with Cisco Duo on it. Do we need to be on E3? The answer is no. Technically speaking, we're on GCC. We are not on the full government. The government tenant kind of like splits itself in two. One half of it is for the federal government and the higher agencies and the Department of Defense. That's really, really, really locked down. The other end of it is designed really for lesser government agencies for it. And a lot of their stuff literally is still tied to the infrastructure of the commercial side, the E3 of it. So even though you're on a government tenant, you still are sharing common Azure components with the rest of the E3 environment. So do we have to migrate off of G3 and go to E3 to turn around and get what we want done? Answer, no. Everything that we want to do right now with security keys, whatever one we choose, can be done on the G3 client. And there really is no reason for us not to move off of G3. The only time that you would want to move off of G3 is if you know you have to integrate Entra with another third-party provider, some cloud provider, and they are outside of the United States, because a lot of the integrations that you have to do on the G government side of it, because of security, has to be done in the U.S. So if I some business over in Germany and I had some main provider over there and I'm on G3 and I need to link it back to my thing over in Germany, I can't do that. That's normally where you start getting in IAM providers, et cetera, to make that a little bit easier on it. But that's normally where you're going to have the problems with it. That's not our environment at this point. Everything that we're doing is in the United States, so there really isn't any reason not to be on the G3 environment at this point. Last but not least on it, is YubiKey actually the best place? Because even the city of Mequon started on YubiKeys, and then they moved out of it, and they started going over to using Microsoft Authenticator on their phones for it. And I can say the Department of Justice pretty much put the end on it. No, if your plan is to go with YubiKeys, you will absolutely want to turn around and do it. And even Cisco confirmed that as well with Cisco Duo. It says, no, we recommend all the municipalities very, very strongly to turn around and go with security keys, because that is the most secure method of authentication that you can use right now at this given period of time for it, and it's relatively unhackable. Even Microsoft Authenticator and Google can turn on the phones can turn around and be spoofed and have false codes being given to it. That the strong recommendation is yes, you chose wisely, young grasshopper. That yes, G3 was the right answer and YubiKey was the right answer off of that. And yes, you can create it within this environment just using Microsoft. If you want to throw in another IAM provider for other reasons, you can go ahead and do it. But Microsoft out of box will support exactly what you are doing as long as you are using a fully routable domain. So the short answer and long answer on all of that on the feasibility study is yes, we did have an architecture problem. Now we know what the architecture problem is. Now how do we turn around and relaunch the project, put it back on the launching pad, and start moving that project forward? And the answer is, well, we know we can't do federated services. We know we can't turn around and do we can do turning around and doing the secondary UPN prefix, or we can turn around and do the full domain migration for it. Topic of discussion, and this is where I look for consulting at this point in time, is my take on the situation is I believe the full domain migration is probably in our best strategic and long-term interest. Short-term, yes, adding the secondary UPN prefix will fix the problem for the short term and get us what we want right now. However, another conversation that I actually had with a security consulting company that works a lot with Expedient here in town, who does a lot of data center hosting, etc., said that we've run into this problem in the past. We've done a lot of onboarding with people with YubiKeys, even with a lot of companies that are dealing stuff with the Department of Defense. They're using it, and I can tell you right now, once you put stuff in Entra and you start synchronizing it, if you need to change something later on down the road, and you now suddenly have your SIDs on those domains, changing a lot of that stuff and doing a domain migration later or changing some of that stuff is going to be very, very, very difficult. You are absolutely best starting with clean data to begin with and then synchronizing it. And to me, that's just common sense. That why would you turn around and take something that isn't meeting a standard out there and then synchronize it and put it into the Entra Cloud, only to then turn around later have to figure out how I'm going to change this now. Oh, now I have to suddenly conform to a new standard, a new regulation for it. Now I'm going to be in a lot of trouble, because in some cases you literally have to, as they told me, you have to delete the object, make your turnaround and changes, restore it, and then recreate your object again in order to turn around and make that change into Entra, particularly if you're playing anything with the GUI IDs for it. So your best bet at this point in time is to turn around, clean your data first. And fortunately, I've been here now for, I hate to say it, 9 years on it. I know the Active Directory data, and we've had so many hands over the last 20 years play into it with the standards on it that I know we do not have, we today have a standard naming convention for every single user. But if I look at the NT-SAM user account name on every single account, at the police department, they were using their badge number. Chief of Police Craig Learman, his login account is CL10 to log into it. Craig Learman, badge number was 10. And that's what they used for the longest period of time. Kathy Heater over at the fire department is Kathy. Debbie Bitts, her logon account is Debbie. I have Bob Mankey, which is Robert M. on it. I have people that have maiden names still in there. Lauren Gottlieb, the former Luby, she's still L. Luby inside of it. This is the time to turn around and transform that data. Instead of just taking all your data accounts and just run a tool and migrate it and put it into the new domain, now's the time to turn around and clean that stuff up. Clean up your user accounts, clean up your global groups. We'll slim down as many global groups, know which ones are actually being used. It's going to require a lot of time, a lot of analysis to turn around and do it, but you're going to be a lot stronger for it at the end, in my opinion, for it. Cut down on the number of group policy objects that you have, know exactly what each and every group policy object actually does. And as we look also a little bit back to our August 15th security tac, do something to prevent Kerber roasting. They stole on the 15th the domain administrator credential. How the heck did they turn around and get it? And there's very common techniques called Kerber roasting that they believe that the hacker turned around and did vulnerabilities to turn around and steal the credentials off the existing local server, and then turning around and doing some brute force attacks against the authentication until they figured out what the password and the key is, that would then allow them to give access to much higher level accounts for it. As part of the domain migration, I would like to move over to Windows Server 2025, the latest and greatest version of the Windows domain, that doesn't allow DES encryption anymore for Kerberos. You have to use AES 256 encryption with it. You have to turn around it. You're going to get rid of SMB1 and SMB2 and even the SMB3 communication. We're going to start using SMB 3.1 in the new domain. Anything that's Windows 12, in Windows 2016 or earlier, is going to turn around and have to become an upgraded to Windows Server 2019 as the minimum version to turn around and actually join in on the new domain. And first and foremost, get absolutely a handle on what you're doing with LDAP for it. LDAP, who's querying it? How can it be queried on it? You don't want the hacker to be able to turn around, let's query LDAP and get a whole listing of every single user account in the domain, so then I can use my password cracking tool to turn around and try to go at it with all of these accounts. This is the time to turn around and start hardening a lot of that security infrastructure. We're not bad right now. We're actually quite good, but with a full domain conversion on it, I want to get much better on it. And it's going to turn around and help us a lot for any of the out-of-control audits like CJIS that are coming down the road that are getting harder and harder and harder and harder. So that was my thoughts of, you could do the short-term solution, do a quick, change to your UPN. All right, now you got your problem with the Active Directory domain applications. You're going to run into that if you do the full domain conversion, but if you do the full domain conversion, it's more time, it's more money, it's more resources, but I think for the long term, you're probably better off for it.
How much more time? How many more resources?
Well, I'm looking at creating an RFP, putting that together. I've been finalizing it up. I actually stole Kelly's format from the one she used for the sound monitor for it, and that's going to go out to bid to multiple consulting companies. So there's going to be literally 3 projects. One, getting some additional help to help us do the actual domain conversion. Estimation, $30,000 is the amount of money that I'm going to put for consulting fees for that. We're going to also have licenses that we're going to have to turn around and buy for that. And then project number 2 will be rebooting and actually starting up Entra ID and reconfiguring our tenant and getting two-factor authentication working. And then last but not least, turning around and moving all of the Exchange accounts from the old domain, the resource domain, getting rid of Exchange 2010, and then moving it directly up over to Exchange Online. So I'm looking at, by the end of August, having all 3 projects done, and then everything will then actually turn around and actually be in the Microsoft Cloud.
How disruptive is it going to be to normal operations?
It always is.
But how disruptive?
It's probably, in my experience, it's probably one of the most disruptive things you can do other than putting it in a whole new ERP. Because everything requires identity and authentication. Now, there's doing it and doing it well. If you don't do it well, it can be highly disruptive. This will be the 4th one that I've done in my career. I see probably the bigger threat is, this is why I want to bring in a consulting company to turn around and do it, because there's a lot of things that I don't know. I've done it 4 times, but it doesn't mean I've done it now with the modern technology for it. So there's probably plenty of things that I don't know with it, that I can tell them how everything is set up here, But I am the only person in IT right now that has even done this before and even knows what they're turning around and looking at. So I know I'm going to need additional assistance, either be it some of it through Microsoft, which or other vendors. I got other vendors chomping at the bits. Converge TP being one that was helping us with the feasibility study for it. That I'll put this out to bid, but I'm looking at least turning around and getting 3 weeks worth of work out of an additional vendor to turn around and help us actually build out the new environment.
Well, I can say that the environments that we operate in and the computers and the networks and the security and everything else just gets more and more and more complicated every single day. And so that means that sometimes you gotta do some heavy duty maintenance every once in a while. And it sounds like we haven't done it for a while.
20 years.
20 years is a long time. Also, because everything gets more and more and more complicated, you want to be on the absolute most well-traveled path, because that if you're not on that well-traveled path, then that's where you run into these kind of weird problems, like with the non-routable, fully routable domain.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like a necessary thing for sure. The only question I have is two questions. One is, how do we know we aren't going to get another E. Bailey saying, yeah, I can do that, and then they really can't because it's more complicated than they will let on to believe, right? So there's the problem right there. And then secondly, is the delay in implementing the Office thing we were trying to do before, Microsoft Cloud before, is that delay critical? Doesn't seem like it.
No, they're not using it now.
Wouldn't matter if we delayed it 6 months.
Well, the biggest thing is sunken costs. We're paying for licenses that we can't use at that point. So the only advantage of doing an accelerated conversion by doing the UPN is you can start maximizing some of the utility out of the value that you're paying for right now. But then if you're willing to delay that, understanding, all right, now we're correcting some of the sins of the past and finally putting them to bed. For example, there will be no shared accounts being allowed to go into the new domain. They want a shared account, it ain't going to happen, folks. And they aren't going to like it. One of the biggest challenges is going to be at the fire department and the police department, because they sign in with FRFD or FRPD instead of their own individual accounts on every single squad computer in that area. And that's a no-no. And they know it's a no-no, but it's just so comfy and convenient. It's that warm blanket that they won't get rid of.
Disable the shared account.
Sounds like old school mentality.
It is. It very much is. And that's when you finally get to say, we're going with a new domain and we can't drag it with us. Even if I have to lie to their face and give them a technical reason that doesn't exist, that just to turn around and get them off of it. They also are doing redirected folders, etc. That's going to start going away. So we know there is a good amount of work that is going to have to be done at the police department and the fire department to get them off of using some of these bad practices that would go away anyways when they start turning around and having to use two-factor authentication.
But you could, even for that, couldn't you just, they all have their own login. They're just not using it, right?
Some of it's going to have to be process change. A good example of this is over at the clerk's counter. Over at Treasury, we have 3 computers right up at the front. And they literally sign on Cache 1, Cache 2, Cache 3. Mm-hmm. Now, the vast majority of the year, they don't need to sign in as Cache 1, Cache 2, and Cache 3. They could turn around and sign in as themselves. The problem is when they're signing in, they're actually creating a batch for all of the transactions that they're doing. So as they're taking in money and taking in receipts, just like a person who's a cashier logging into a computer at the grocery store, so you're now accountable for the transactions that you're doing on that particular machine, now you're creating a batch. And if a person has to turn around and sign out of the machine and sign in as somebody else, now you have to turn around and create another batch. Vast majority of the time, 11 months out of the year, they don't have any problem. What about the month of December, when they suddenly bring in a bunch of interns to turn around and help them do data entry work. You got lines of people down the treasury counter waiting to turn around and pay their property taxes. All right, this intern's now on their own account. You would have to create an account for them. They sign in and they're creating a batch. This intern uses this computer. They're creating a batch. On this computer, they're turning around and creating a batch, each under their own names. Well, someone has to leave or goes to lunch. Person has to sign out. Now you have to turn around and create a whole new batch for settlement all over again. Right now, they're just using a shared account, so if a person has to jump in and do stuff, they don't have to turn around and create new batches. And where you're creating thousands and thousands and thousands of property tax checks, creating those batches does become a bit of an accounting nightmare. My answer is, yeah, sucks to be you, deal with it. Create a new process to figure this out, because we had the same problem with the clerk's department with the election, that when someone who has to go and leave and you have to go in there and they have to sign on with another person's credentials on it, figure out a secure way of dealing with this and figure out a way of dealing with the batches. That's going to have to be a new process that you're going to have for that one time a year that you do it. And guess what? Today is March. It's going to be a long time till it's December. You got a long time to figure out how you're going to deal with this process. And they already been warned about it, because they were warned about it with two-factor authentication. That's the problem with we're interrupting disruptive technology. A new domain and two-factor authentication, which will require some process changes.
But they could do the process changes now even without the two-factor
Correct.
authentication. They could get on it. I'm thinking
Correct.
of the fire department. They just disable those common accounts and make them use their own accounts. They'll gnash their teeth.
They're going to
now,
have to figure
but
out
they
how to
won't gnash
log
their
in,
teeth
yep,
later, but
over
there's other
to
changes.
over to
Right.
NetMotion and such like that. Yeah, and sign into NetMotion. They have to figure out a new process of doing it, so for each and every single person.
Yes. Right.
But these are bad security practices that we know of
For sure.
today that have been a nightmare to diffuse since August, that we know have to be diffused. And now it's just like, guess what, folks? Here comes the domain conversion. You've got to fix this, or you're going to be left alone by the side of the road. And your stuff is going to get converted. It's going to hang out in the old domain, and then we'll be bringing a whole team of people coming in here saying, what are you going to do to turn around and change this process problem so you can turn around and convert? Now, obviously, there's going to be about a month's worth of analysis even before we do this. When I'm planning on this, it's like I'm putting this up for going eventually for the domain migration, at least, if we say that's the right way to go. That'll be the May 6th Common Council meeting for them to turn around and approve it. So before
what are
that,
they actually approving?
the actual execution of the contract.
The spend.
And on April 22nd or 23rd, whatever our next meeting is, we will be reviewing the proposals and then selecting which proposal we want to go with. So one of the big differences between iDaily and this is the Technology Commission is actually going to review this and is going to vet it before we turn around and actually approve who gets the contract. So I have to get the RFP out the door, give it to them. They have to write a proposal. They have to get me to the proposal before April 18th. So then we can then turn around and review the proposal on the 22nd, 23rd. And then that then goes to Common Council for final approval on May 6th.
So does it make sense, since this is going to all get done in a relatively short period of time, you were talking August, does it make sense to let each department know that when we do this, you're going to be affected?
Yes.
And what we want you to do is to give us in the next 60 days a plan for how you're going to address that problem. So
Yes.
the
That's
treasurer's
part of the
office is gonna
analysis
have to
is-
say,
yes.
Okay, well, all right, we're
Because we just can't shut off the accounts
well,
without...
we can't wait till December either for them
No.
to figure out that, okay, you know, this thing Jim told us about 9 months ago, well, okay, we better figure this out now, and it's December, you know what I mean? That happens all the time. But maybe give them a fictitious, you know, arbitrary deadline for coming up with a plan. And then if they can't come up with a plan, at least we know, hey, they just don't know what they're going to do.
And that's the next department heads
Right.
meeting conversation,
Yeah.
too, that's coming up.
Okay. That'll probably, so that the fire department and the treasurers and the clerks get their stuff.
And
figured
I've
out.
already talked about this to the police department and the fire department. I've already talked about the shared accounts right now with the director of finance. So Danielle and Roseanne both know this is coming down the road. We talked about it about a month and a half ago, and we were talking about 2FA and how we were going to turn around and do it. So they know it's coming already.
Yeah.
At least our biggest use cases know that, yeah, there's going to be a problem. I may
wasn't-
ferret
wasn't-
out more.
I wasn't so worried about them knowing it. I was worried about them doing something about it, and that's where an arbitrary, some sort of deadline to say, hey, tell us what your plan is. And if they come back and say, well, we don't have one, well, then we know they need help.
Yep.
I mean, that's all well and good, but those are all operational issues that are not in the IT Commission's domain. What we need to decide is, are we doing a full domain or are we doing the short term? And I vote for a full domain. Do the full conversion now, because you're not going to be able to get it justified later on, or you're going to have to go through the same process to get it justified that you're going to have to go through now. Do it early, get it done. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I agree.
I would agree.
One saying that we always talked about, because I used to do like services for a lot of customers, is there's nothing more permanent than a temporary fix.
That was exactly my
So
thought.
my recommendation is the full migration as well. It's always more.
I got to
work,
remember
but,
that.
you know. Same.
All right, so I guess we're looking for a motion here.
Yeah, so I just got one question. I'm good with the full. Agree. I've seen plenty of things that got written for 2 weeks in the last 10 years. So yeah, I'm good with that. I guess the question I have is, we're gonna go through, we're gonna do all this work that's gonna change. You know, if you look at it from each individual person, kind of how they interact, right? And we're changing to YubiKeys, we're doing all these other things. What's the plan to, I'll say, educate everybody? So we got all the tech change, but tech, if I don't explain to people what they got to do, I either just created everybody that just stops and can't do anything, or I made everything 10 times worse, even though technology-wise it should be better.
It's not training yet. It's
Yes.
communication.
Yeah,
plan.
it's-
What's the
Believe it or
communication
not,
plan?
Right
I
now,
have
yeah.
a proposal. I'm still waiting to talk to Danielle to see if there's funding for it. But there's a company right now that is going to allow us to do some basic Windows 10. They're going to do the training on site for us to get people trained on Windows 11. And it'll be between an hour and a half to 2 hour class, and we can go through some of this literally in the training class
Yes.
with them as well. I may have to schedule a second training class if we don't have that project funded for it. We may have to turn around, and IT will have to deal with the training classes, just like we did with all the phone training that we had to go through as well on it. They're going to have to learn this. I really wanted this to happen when we gave them their new Lenovo computers at the beginning of the year. And that's the thing that steam was just gouging out of my ears when that blew up. Because the goal was when they get the new computer, that's when I would then have them sign in with Entra. I would provision them not only with the new computer, I would provision them with the new YubiKey. We could then turn around and give them some instruction on this, because we weren't going to do all departments all at once. We were going to go by department to department by department, and that would be very manageable. Right now, because we don't have it, they're getting their computers. It's signing into the old domain at this point in time, which now means, all right, I have to do the YubiKey again later, and we're going to have to install Office 365 on all of the machines later as well. So we're going to have to retouch the equipment a lot more than what the original plan was for it. So the original plan, which is destroyed now, was to turn around and do the training at the point of when they were getting the new machinery. Unfortunately, now we're going to have to give them different structured training.
Okay. Yeah, because I think that's the part you just got to think through is, as we take those steps, what do you have to keep everybody operating both from what's coming, and then once they're getting it, how's it going to
Yeah, so if you're familiar, there's a change management. It's called ProSci, and they have an ADKAR principle, which is drive the awareness, the desire, knowledge, ability, and the
Yep.
reinforcement. If you that's the big thing when it comes to like doing these big changes is people are always going to be hesitant, people are always going to be concerned, but if you just think about it and you break down, what am I going to do to drive awareness? What am I going to do to make people want to actually change? Like, you got to think about it. It's like, why, all this stuff that we're doing is, we know it's important for security and IT to do, but the end user, they don't understand it.
Right.
So you have to find something that makes it valuable to them and something
Right.
that's going to help it out. So you just got to put it into their terms, and the more communicative you can be. I know that was the big thing I did with a lot of organizations was like, okay, how are you going to tell your 30,000 users about this? Like, put up posters on the water cooler, send out emails to offer office hours, like all these little things just to, make
My
people
favorite
aware
is a
of it.
lunch pizza party.
There you go.
They
You got
get
money.
really inspired by food. If you can give them a free lunch and a chew and view session, that's the easiest way to get them there and engaged.
Isn't there also in each department somebody who's kind of the go-to person? So, like, for example, if you had the clerk's office, you pick somebody in that area that we give them, we make sure they know this, right? They know
Yes.
the whole thing, right? And so then when somebody comes in or somebody's a little timid about it or they're just not confident, right? They're not calling you. They're just talking to the person. Oh yeah, so and so. That's that. We
Yes,
must have. That
we do
today.
have, but there's obviously different levels of skill sets
Yeah.
between the internal champions as well. But the ones that really keep me up at night, the help desk can deal with stuff 8 to 5. But the real worry is, all right, what's the people? Because we got 3 shifts in the police department.
But there should be then somebody on each shift.
Exactly, and that's
Kinda-
where I have to get the sergeants and the captains
Yes.
involved
Yes.
on that to answer the
Give them
questions.
some special training to make sure
And
they're very
really
confident.
hit police dispatch hard on it too.
Yeah.
That's another group of people that are signing in with shared accounts that shouldn't be. Any other thoughts?
We've talked about an awful lot. I wouldn't even know how to craft a motion out of everything we've talked about.
We don't have to. It's just if you agree with the consultation moment, then I just move forward. You can create a motion if you want to create a motion, but it's really not necessary.
All right. All those in favor of the full domain migration path?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No opposed. I like the idea of the local subject matter experts, though. That's good.
Yeah, because they're right there.
Yeah.
That was
They're instant. They're
Yeah,
like,
having a really good champions program is always a really big for
Yeah.
migrations, and they can be advocates and they can be your voice and like what's going on, and they can help surface those weird and unusual problems and scenarios that you might not even know of. Like you know of some of the bad ones, but you might not know of some of the smaller ones that
Right.
are going on, and they might be able to help figure them out and at least advocate.
The Active Directory integrated applications are going to be the worst.
Any additional comments before we move on? That was an awful lot. All right, the next order of business is the NIST security policy for media protection and policy procedures.
Again, I made a few changes here. The only one was Jim who turned around and gave me some additional thoughts to turn around and add, and I did add those and reflected inside of the new policy for it. The majority of it was more procedural
Yeah.
on it. How do we know this person's supposed to turn around and have this particular role? How do we turn around and do a little bit of registration on it for it? So I did incorporate those into the new basically policy for the media access. There were a few more, and I also realized that the physical access and security will most likely be changed probably almost as soon as it's been approved. And there'll be a new version because we got a new door access control system coming in. And when I wrote that one, I wrote it in December, and we didn't have the Johnson Control projects even approved at that point, let alone the whole card access system. There's going to be a lot of questions. Who's going to be making the cards? Who's going to be responsible for it? Are we going to have personal pictures on it? I know it's an HID card on it. Beyond that, I have no idea what they selected for the cards. It's still having arguments right now which doors are going to have the badge readers on it and which ones don't have it. I do know the police department will have to get far more involved in that project than what they currently are at, because ultimately, if we still are in alignment when I owned the project before I turned it over to Kelly as part of the Johnson Control project, is at that time we had a meeting in, I think it was 2022, with the police department and all of the other departments, and the police department has all access right now to our video surveillance systems that we have standardized with Milestone. And I want to get to the point that any door access control system that we have here is also going to be standardized where the police have access to it. If there is a major security event, God help us, a shooter or something like that, I want the police to be able to open and lock any of the doors in any of the buildings and have access to all of the cameras, and that's all on the wall over at the police dispatch for it. And they have full control to turn around and do whatever they want to do with, including revoking access badges at the police department. If it becomes a city security issue, the police should be involved as the first access point on it. They agreed to this a while back ago. Now I think we need to have a reaffirmation that they still see it in that same light, because we have new people sitting in the chairs nowadays, and we had enough people retire on it. So I do realize that that particular one is probably going to get changed relatively quickly, but does anyone see any issues, if you had a chance to read it, with any of these two policies?
I had gone through it. I don't see anything of substance that needs to be changed. I mean, there may be some smaller things in there that will probably be changed as people come up with ideas, but in the overall, the architecture of the document is good. The information and the content is good as far as I'm concerned.
I would just suggest that we set a date to review these in the future, just as there's like you said, as there are updates to the system. So like, maybe it's an annual, maybe it's semi-annually, whatever.
We're going to
the
have
time-
12 to 14 of them.
Yeah, I know. So whatever the time frame is,
Yeah.
let's make sure that we define when we want to review it, so it's not something that just.
Because I got two more in queue coming up right after these.
But you know what I'm saying,
Yeah.
right? So we don't just accidentally 3 years go by and it's like, oh wait, we haven't reviewed this. What's changed?
Yeah, it'll look like
I
a
don't- I
strategic
don't think-
technology plan.
I don't think we could go 3 years. Didn't we already say we would review them on an annual basis?
It's on an annual basis.
So
Okay,
it's
there
from,
you go.
it's from the date authored or the date
Right.
released.
Perfect.
We have to review them.
I did not know.
This is the same documents we got in December that we didn't read.
He
deferred,
no,
right?
he tweaked them. A
He
little
tweaked
bit.
them.
I mean, about the same.
Yes.
I just want to make sure. Because
Yeah,
I
he
spent a lot of
tweaked
time
it.
going through them in December, and I'm like, oh my God.
I know.
Now go figure
Oh
out.
my God.
They were slightly tweaked, slightly.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Well, and the comments that I sent to you after
Yep.
after the last meeting, that was based on an ISO implementation I did of the same policy. So, and just thinking ahead.
But I know I have to have these for sieges. Because everything, even though the police department does have a lot of their own operational policies and sometimes what they call their time policies, that this will be based on what they have done already. This incorporates basically what the police department is doing. CJIS only really covers what the police department is doing. That's what's in scope. They don't really care what the other departments are doing. But yet, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and what they're doing is what the rest of the city is going
Right.
to do, because eventually someone's going to audit us on it, whether it be the DOJ or somebody else.
Right. And all those CJIS procedures are going to point back to the NIST 853, which is what this is.
To make people understand just a little how horrible right now the audits are for everyone, I can't even get time right now to sit down and talk face to face with the COJ auditor because they're so backlogged. We asked to turn around and have a site visit to turn around and talk with us, and so the best we could do is video conference it. They ran the 125 questionnaire at us, and we submitted it. And out of 125 questions, 79 came back denied.
Really?
And this is, we need more information on this. So now I have to go through that 125 and revise our answer to the 79 questions. Now there's come good reasons why 79 are being advised, because I realize a human's not looking at this. It's a computer, an AI, that's turning around and looking at this and then regurgitating back at the answers on it. And in some cases, the question just wasn't all that clear, and then it suddenly points where it is in the book and gives you a lot more information. All right, now I'm going to change my answer based upon more clarity on it. Other instances of it is, especially the areas with authenticators and multi-factor authentication. All right, here's the authentication method we're using. We're not using this, and this. Well, if you say, no, we're not using this, we're using this, they still mark this as an invalid question. And you will be enforced now. I love that that little verbiage that they put on the enforcement will now begin. And it's like, why are you marking me bad boy on this? I'm not using it. There's a reason why I wrote no. But a computer is just going through this and like, wrong answer.
Standard is out of
And,
date.
and even though the right answer was no. So we're going to be into a lot of that stuff for it.
Hey, that's how you get them to show up.
I don't want them to show up.
I thought you started the conversation. We were trying to have a conversation.
Yes,
Why
try-
not do a site visit?
We
Sure,
wanted a
do
site visit to go
You say,
get
"No,
some clarity
you have
on
fire
some of this
suppression."
stuff, but I can also realize, be careful what you ask for, right? So there's no additional things. We can basically do a motion to recommend,
Sure.
and then we'll do the media protection, and then this then goes eventually onto one of the Common Council agendas for the Common Council to review it, and once they review it, it then becomes official policy.
So do we have a motion to recommend approval as written?
Yes, I motion to recommend the
Approval as written.
approval is read.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Next one.
The next one, next order of business is the NIST security policy for physical and environmental security policy.
Do you want to do a motion? Same old.
Knowing that you're going to change it slightly?
Knowing that I'm going to change it.
Well, okay.
I mean, these are living documents. These are not,
Yeah.
documents.
It's going to be a while before they get the system up. They're putting in the door access control system, but when they'll actually have it programmed and give us those cards, I don't know.
So, make a motion that we approve as written.
Second.
Okay.
Who was first?
I
Okay.
just snuck myself in there. All right. Let's wait for Jim to stop writing here.
Where's okay.
Do you want to say aye?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes, you have to vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No opposed. I guess I gotta read Robert's
You have
rules
to
of
say
order
the
or
ayes
something.
have it.
The ayes have it, yes. All right, the next order of business is the technical issues review.
These things we just did weren't
They
technical.
weren't technical. No.
I kind of wish John Farney was here for this one. I'd be interested in his insight on it. Technical issues. Rapid7 started releasing an updated version of their endpoint and agent that includes the Velociraptor digital forensics toolset. During the August security incident, the analysis toolset, Velociraptor, was used to capture state information from the running VMs. This was uploaded then to Rapid7 response team for interrogation. The toolset is now fully incorporated into the auto-updating agents, and the forensics information can now be relayed to the SOC without intervention by the customer. The new capabilities were rolled out as a larger March AI initiatives. AI is now being used to assist the SOC on SCI events and correlation, helping to reduce the number of false positive alerts. So Velociraptor is now directly included in the agent, and if I get the call at 1 o'clock in the morning, I don't have to turn around and immediately run the tool set. The SOC can turn around and do it themselves as I'm sitting here driving in. And since there's sometimes an hour delay, that's a good thing. And then we move to the director's notes on IT operations. On March 4th, a major power outage impacted the northern Franklin and Oak Creek region, causing major facilities to transfer over to generator power several times that day. The exact cause of the power outages were unknown, but the impact did impact both the primary WISCnet and Spectrum backup circuits. A 45-minute WAN outage was incurred as upstream WISCnet nodes appeared also to be impacted by the power outages. The WAN architecture is resilient for both a primary and backup carrier connection. In this case, the incident of both carriers did fail as power issues were prevalent throughout the area. Unfortunately, regional power and communication issues can impact localized communications. So even though we do have a primary and a secondary backup circuit, when the power is out throughout the region and routers and other things are out, I can't control that and you can't route around it.
And they don't know what the cause was.
Squirrel.
Wait, so you're talking the March 4th outage?
March 4th outage.
And the power outage that was in Franklin and a bunch of areas?
Yeah.
There was a tree on a power line.
Is that what?
Yeah, the tree outside. It was outside the.
We
Funny.
almost had we almost had to turn around and cancel the common council meeting that night.
It was a tree on. It was a tree outside. They got a 15-foot zone on each side. And a tree outside of that fell on. Made contact with the line. I think if that's.
It's
the one
probably
I'm
it.
thinking of,
It was
that's-
on off all
Yes,
day.
Correct.
Yeah.
That was that one.
Would have been a Friday,
March 4th?
No,
March
it was a Tuesday.
Tuesday.
There was a council meeting, it was a Tuesday.
Because we were out of. Because I don't live far away, and we kept going. I got called. My wife. I wasn't. I was out. So.
Honey, fix it.
And that was like
Well,
the
she was letting
whole.
me know.
That was like the whole area. I never lost power.
That was,
there.
this-
It was,
this
it was
area.
sporadic throughout the
Okay.
area.
This area, not
Okay.
not all of Franklin.
So it was the northern area.
Okay.
On March 5th, external DNS for FranklinWI.gov zone, not the UPN, the DNS, was moved to a new set of secure DNS servers at Heartland Business System. Heartland Business Systems implemented 4 new DNS servers that replaced the 2 servers that were contained within a single data center. The new servers were added to the new .gov registrar, which surprisingly did not create any form of propagation delay. No problems or issues were a result of the change. So, our external DNS zone file is now hosted on new servers. On March 6th, yay, the police department RMS and CAD systems was upgraded from ProPhoenix 2022 to 2024 R2. 2 outages were needed for the upgrade as a pre-launch patch was first applied to the 2022 installation on February 25th. After the system was confirmed to be stable, a full in-place upgrade was of both the application and database servers was performed. In spite of a significant upgrade to the base code and custom applications, very few problems or issues cropped up over the past couple of days. This was a very successful upgrade and one that caused only minor issues. The PD is now on the current release of the software and with the very latest security updates. No problem was encountered with Milwaukee County Tesla system. That also ties into CAD. Historically, others have been here a while, ProPhoenix, that's normally the application that causes us huge amounts of grief. And migrating up to 2 full versions, I was expecting problems, but fortunately everything actually went very, very well for it.
Nice.
Also, when people are asking,
Good
what's
news.
IT doing all the time, that's one. As one of the last Ring Central conversion steps, the Polycom X50 conferencing systems are being ported over to Zoom, from Zoom over to the new vendor, Ring Central. These are legacy conferencing systems that were purchased at the very beginning of the pandemic, but they are still being used with some frequency. This is particularly true in the hearing room and the council chambers, which are often pre-booked with meetings. Fortunately, the Polycom X50 does accept Ring Central as a built-in conferencing carrier. There are some residual issues with calendars, which I just fixed, but we are now finally able to deactivate the last of our Zoom licenses.
Good.
They also lasted 5 years, the Polycoms, without a burp. Good little, small system, but it's a little champion.
They're expensive for a reason.
Yes, but they are a workhorse. Okay.
Okay. Next item up is future agenda items. The first one we have listed is the IT security project with Johnson Controls. Second one is failure avoidance and mitigation. And I don't know, Jim, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
We were looking at how, when we talk about vendor fail and vendor failures, how can we turn around and help mitigate more and more instances of vendor failure? We can most likely add domain migration on this as well.
Okay.
And cloud migration strategy would be cloud migration and email conversion.
Because we should talk about what else, if you gotta touch a bunch of stuff too, what do we start moving instead of having a kind of redo on-prem, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Should add policy review here too.
I have one item, I just wanna go back to the 365 thing when we get the chance. I got one other question related to that.
I would say ask away.
Ask away. So at one point, we had the cyber insurance that it's driving the YubiKey and all those kind of things, right? And then we also had that Exchange had to get migrated, and there was some questions about that. Did we get that extended with the fact that we got to go to August? I think February or something was.
They have not hit me up again for it.
Okay. So that's where we're sitting right now.
They have
Okay.
they have not screamed, and if they're not screaming, I'm not
Okay.
concerned.
All right.
Other questions?
No, that was my
Okay.
Thank you.
The next meeting date is April 23rd, 2025 at 6 p.m., as noted on the page. And if there's no other questions, then I move we adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
We need a
Aye.
motion first,
Oh,
unless you want to motion it.
I will motion that we
Okay.
adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Wow, 6:55.